All right. Thank you all for joining. I know this morning sessions and these afternoon sessions have been really informative for myself. Me and Chris were just sharing, as well as Michael. Glad you're able to join us. So we're going to do some brief introductions and then jump right into the presentation. And I know we really want this to be an interactive session. So please feel free to raise your hand, ask questions. Because I know we all have different areas of expertise that we all bring here. So we're all subject matter experts in regard to the services we provide for families. And so we really appreciate you all being here. And this is a space where we can workshop and be better together. So I'll introduce myself first. My name is Ejiro. I am the Senior Counsel of Public Policy and Advocacy for United Way California Capital Region here in Sacramento. And I'll hand it over to Chris.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris, and I'm the Senior Director of Program Analytics and Evaluations with United Way California Capital Region. Yeah, really excited to speak to you today. I'll be talking more about the data aspects of navigating policy advocacy in support of families and children. Yeah, so really excited to hear from you and share a little bit as well. Okay, so who are we? And when I say we, I'm talking about our organization, United Way California Capital Region. So we've been mobilizing our community to action so all can thrive for about 100 years. We were founded or started in 1923, so we're quite an old organization. And in particular, we serve the counties of Amador, Yolo, El Dorado, Placer, and Sacramento. So kind of counties surrounding, yeah, Sacramento and California capital, hence the name. For those of you familiar with United Ways, all over California and globally, there's four pillars of work for United Ways globally, and that's the first pillar is around building healthy community. The second is around increasing youth opportunities. The third is around financial security, and the fourth is around community resilience. And so specifically, some of the programs that our United Way, well, maybe first I'll say that United Way is a global brand and there is a global organization, but and there are some, there are connections and there are conferences where we're attending and learning from one another, but largely each United Way in each city or in each region, we're kind of represent a region, operates pretty separately and very separately financially and doesn't necessarily have similar type of programming other than these four pillars being the general frame for us. And so yeah, it's a little bit of helpful context to understand, maybe you know a lot about one United Way or multiple United Ways in California, but sometimes their work and programmatic focus can be quite different. Specifically for us, and most relevant to yeah, this conference and the work that you all do is we have programming around guaranteed income. We're pretty much the only organization in our region and kind of the Sacramento and greater area region that runs guaranteed income programs. We've been doing that since I believe 2021 or 2022. We've had a few different programs from a few different funding sources for this, and in that, we're engaging households that are income eligible. Sometimes there's other eligibility requirements depending on the program. For example, we have some guaranteed income programs that focus specifically on foster youth who have aged out of the foster system, and so we provide them with guaranteed income after that. And so we have one program that's continuing around that. We also have some that are more generic income qualified programs that are supporting families in our region, particularly in Sacramento. Pretty much, I think all of our guaranteed income programs focus specifically on Sacramento County. And some of that, some of the guaranteed income programs were engaging individuals, and sometimes we're engaging families. Um, and so that's one big area of our work is guaranteed income. Another is around housing, particularly in Sacramento County and Yolo County. We are for almost 2 years, I think a year and a half, we've been running a kind of CalAIM funded housing navigation program and kind of sustainability program, providing case navigation and placement and then kind of case management, follow-up and sustainability services through CalAIM funding to get people and get families and individuals housed. And again, we have a mix of clientele within that program. Sometimes it's individuals, sometimes it's families. Yeah, you'll see some. You'll see a little bit of our work with families later in the presentation. Uh, and and we also have a homelessness prevention program that is quite new. It just started a few months ago, so it's one of our other big housing programs. Um, and that we're providing, based on an application and based on kind of a research-backed set of questions that tries to identify risk of homelessness. We provide flexible financial assistance to either, again, that household, individual or family, to in an effort to prevent homelessness, and we'll be tracking outcomes with them over the life of the program to support that. That's in collaboration with the county of Solano, actually, so a separate county, but also a few other organizations are helping us implement that program. And we also do quite a bit of work with youth, particularly early childhood education. We have basic literacy programs, or kind of after school literacy tutoring programs. And then we also support the implementation of some community schools programs, which are federally funded programs to organize different stakeholders at the school level, including parents, students, teachers, administrators, around identifying needs within that school and resourcing those needs, and taking a whole child and wraparound service type of approach to supporting eventually, educational outcomes, but a lot of it's around collectively identifying needs and resourcing those. So yeah, that's a view of a few of our major programming areas. I wanted to thank everyone who filled out the survey beforehand, and I just look at the results here, and so I'll just share them verbally. But I asked, a question to participants around what's everyone's experience level with advocacy, and particularly integrating data and storytelling into their advocacy. And yeah, got a lot of great response. It seems like a lot of people who are attending, a lot of people who took the survey. I think about 21 people, 21 of the attendants took the survey, and about 38% of people, so about a third of people, said that they have quite a bit of experience with advocacy, but maybe don't feel fully comfortable, or don't feel like they're fully leveraging data in the way that they do that, and want to presumably improve around that. And then 48%, so about half of you, said that you do have a lot of experience with advocacy, and also you feel you're able to integrate data into that pretty effectively. And so that's great. So actually, what I'm going to do now, instead of showing the poll results, is maybe ask if someone would be interested in sharing just maybe 15 to 30-second share out of how your organization approaches advocacy and integrating data into that advocacy. Is anyone willing to share? And maybe Ejiro, you can help me with hands or the chat box, because I can't see them at the moment. Okay, I see Megan Escoto raised a hand. Please, turn your mic on, and would love to hear, your organization's brief experience around advocacy and using data to support that.
Yeah, so I actually, just as a individual, I sit on a legislative panel in the state of California. And so I'm on a panel with other survivors of foster care and human trafficking. And so we basically are reviewing legislation as it comes in from senators, and then we send them our feedback on, we think this is helpful or harmful, and this is why. And then we go down to the Capitol, and then we sit down and we meet with senators and give them our feedback and answer questions. And then sometimes we participate in press releases as well after a law that we've advocated for gets passed.
Mm. Yep. Great. Thank you. That's a really amazing example. And it actually ties into some of the things we'll talk about later, both in terms of level of advocacy, but also the types of data that might be compelling during advocacy. So thank you for sharing that. And please, others, feel free to raise your hand and share your experiences as points come up that interest you or that you have, want to share about. So our objectives of this session, we've already started providing an overview, a little bit of our work, but not exactly as it relates to our advocacy efforts. Some of those programs that I mentioned earlier are pretty literally the direct result of our advocacy, either at the county level, at various levels. And so, yeah, some of our programs wouldn't exist without advocacy. But yeah, our objectives, we want to provide an overview of our advocacy efforts in addressing systemic barriers. We would like to equip you. Some of you sound very experienced, so we can equip each other with advocacy tools to influence policy changes. And then lastly, to explore the intersection of local data and storytelling in effective advocacy. All right, and I'll hand things over to Ejiro.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to just give an overview of our beginnings in policy work directly, and just so you kind of see our trajectory of getting into policy, and would love to also hear some of that process for you all. Definitely appreciated Megan you sharing. So, as Chris mentioned earlier, United Way is a network of organizations. There are zip codes all throughout the United States of America that has a local United Way. And so I'm sure you all have a local United Way in your area that you may be partnering with. So United Way Worldwide has done policy um, for many, many years since its beginnings. And then United Ways of California also has been doing policy for a long time since its beginnings. And that they represent a network of California United Ways. United Way California Capital Region, as Chris had mentioned, has been around for 100 years, but we directly had not been involved in policy because we have our own separate board of directors that has separate initiatives, and policy is not an area where we, in terms of systemic policy on the state level, it was not something that we directly influenced or was part of our strategic plan, or it wasn't part of our major goals of our overarching goal to end poverty in the capital region. And so in 2020, the United Way California Capital Region Board of Directors saw that systemic poverty needed to be altered through policy changes. And so we implemented it for the first time in our strategic plan. And with that, we allocated resources in hiring staff in 2022 to be able to directly do policy work. And my position here at United Way is a direct reflection of that work. And so I'm the second person in this role. I started working for United Way in 2023. So I've been here for a little bit over 2 years. And I'm really, really excited as this is the first year that we are actually co-sponsoring legislation. So it definitely has taken some time, but we're really excited about the future of doing direct policy work and advocacy work. And so some of our current policy and advocacy efforts include addressing systemic barriers through policy analysis and research, advocating for child and family well-being. In the next slide, we'll talk about the policy areas that we jump into, and then partnering with the local, state, and federal legislators to equip policies. And so we have our 5-county region that we cover. And so This includes city councils, this includes boards of education, school districts, folks who make decisions on several different levels. We foster relationships on the local level, and then as well as on the state level. This year being the first year we're sponsoring state legislation. And then we do that in partnership with our network partner, United Ways of California, which represent United Ways throughout the state. And then federally with United Ways worldwide, we do federal policy and advocacy. And then also on the federal level, there's a local delegation of organizations, businesses, elected officials that we do an annual trip, advocacy trip to, yes, I thought that was just my computer. I think, Chris, is there a way that we could, there's on the screen, there are.
Yeah, let me.
Okay, I'll kind of continue to talk to the slides. Thank you. I'm sorry. I thought it was just my screen, but thank you for raising that. And then also being on the federal level, we have that annual trip with local organizations, elected officials, and it's called Cap to Cap. It's the largest delegation of an individual like region throughout the nation. And so we participate as an organization leading a subgroup. And so we talk to our congressional officials when we're over there. We talk to local agencies that affect decisions that are of concern to us. We sit on the community resources team on this local delegation trip. And so that community resources team has a specific focus on housing as well as financial empowerment. So we write a paper on financial empowerment and we give our findings and recommendations to our congressional officials as well as national agencies, including the Interagency Council on Homelessness and HUD. We regularly meet with them, as well as other organizations as well. And then also supporting community-led initiatives as well. And so I would love to hear from, thanks Cindy for sharing. Maybe I don't know if we could unshare and share again. Maybe that will, if it reset, it'll be helpful. Or I don't know if it might be Google. It might be.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could download the PowerPoint.
Let me try resharing without. Yeah, Sarah recommended. Yeah, maybe just not. I shared just my PowerPoint window, and so I could try to share my whole window and see if that improves things.
But I would love to hear from some of our participants. What are some coalitions that you all are a part of, or some groups that are helpful in terms of organizing your advocacy efforts? And please feel free to just come off mute and share a coalition or a group that you may be a part of. It could be local.
This is like a really small example, but I'm getting my master's at San Diego State right now, and I'm part of the Payment for Placements chapter there. So we're right now working towards like hours alignment when it comes to internships with our faculty and staff. So yeah, very low level, very specific to our organization, but it is also a national organization that is throughout the US as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely policy comes out of those groups where you're very like subject specific. And I saw also Michael shared End Poverty California. That's a great one. Statewide coalition. The Children's Movement, Children Now, also a great coalition. Partners in Equity, San Diego, YMCA, Child Action, ECE Coalition, Sacramento County Child Care Coalition, Local Advocacy, wonderful. National Family Resource Center Coalition. Yeah, that's a great one too. My first job was at a local Birth and Beyond Family Resource Center here in Sacramento. And so definitely have a lot of love for the family resource centers. And so all of those, because policy, as many of you all know, hardly ever happens in a vacuum. It's a group of individuals who have experiences. Oh, that's great. It's gone. Who have experiences and work with the community and can partner with the community to lift up voices that will help us all to thrive and live in a better and healthier environment. And so, next slide, please. Okay, so when we first got into identifying our policy initiatives, our board of directors identified the scope of what we'd be jumping into. And with that, we also, our board of directors has a committee, an advocacy and public policy committee that vet all of our policy goals, initiatives, and whether we're support, oppose, or stay neutral on specific pieces of legislation. And that committee is made up of board members. And then we recently are going to be introducing some non-board members who won't have the ability to vote on supporting, opposing, or staying neutral on legislation, but can help to move the work forward. And so our 5 areas of focus include childhood academic success, as Chris was mentioning earlier, because we've become subject matter experts doing a lot of direct programming around literacy initiatives and academic success with our literacy tutoring program, as well as our work with Kinder Camp. We do a Kinder Camp where individual children who didn't get a chance to go to preschool get a month-long boot camp. And so there's a lot of data information that comes out of those that we can lift up through policy. Tax policy, United Ways throughout the nation do free tax prep. And so a lot of that is advocacy around being able to claim both the national and state earned income tax credits and several other tax credits, and making sure tax policy works for our goals and initiatives as an entity that supports families with children. Economic justice, as well, Chris was mentioning our guaranteed income programs, making sure that there's a sustainable source of funding for those. And this year, we're very, very excited as we are sponsoring legislation for the first time, as I hinted at earlier, and it's a bill called SB 33. Which will provide guaranteed income for youth who are unhoused. And so I know this is a challenging budget year and we're holding on to the legislation. It's a reiteration of policy SB 333, which was introduced last session, but didn't make it out of committee. And so we are reintroducing it again with Senator Cortese, and we're hoping that it'll get across the finish line. And so it's under that pillar of economic justice. We also are doing workforce development in the appropriations year of 2022-2023. We actually applied for a federal earmark with Sierra Health Foundation. We applied on behalf of Sierra Health Foundation. They were funded, and which this is definitely an area where I'm hoping we can all brainstorm, share resources in terms of applying for federal funds and dollars for policy work, and also just for your individual organization, and how government is a source of funding for us to continue to do our work. And so we applied for this community project funding request through Doris Matsui, who is our local congressional representative within the Sacramento area. And it's each member of Congress has their own process, but in Sacramento, there was a relationship that we have and we've been cultivating over the years with our congressional delegation. We went through the process of filling out the form, coming up and processing the idea under the workforce development umbrella, which is something we call Green Ambitions, where youth are actually going to be constructing and supporting high opportunity youth a electric vehicle charging station and hub. And so it's a electric vehicle share opportunity that it's in South Sacramento, actually, with a local partner, South Sacramento Christian Center. And so I will say a lot of community project funding requests are around actual construction and developing or building a specific geography. So we picked South Sacramento, where the EV hub will actually live and sit, where once it is finished constructed, there will be electric vehicle cars where people can go get rides to doctor's appointments, medical appointments. There are a lot of different opportunities for youth here, and it all started with applying for federal dollars. I know the landscape is really challenging in that realm right now, and so I know we're just being creative with opportunities for funding. But it is anticipated that the rules for community project funding requests or earmarks should be released. It's much delayed. This time last year, those rules had already been distributed to organizations and members of Congress, but there's just a lot of changes. But it is another opportunity to flag. And then community health around CalAIM. That is also one of the big areas of policy that we support at United Way, being that nearly half of our staff are housing navigators or sustainability staff. And so a lot of the policy around that is helping to keep CalAIM going. And also, as Chris is going to mention earlier, tracking metrics of progress with what we're doing with families so that we can keep these policies going, both at the federal and state level. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So some of the tools that we use include storytelling and statistics to talk about real life impact. And I think really catering the data that you share to the audience that you're giving. There are certain data points that are more impactful with other legislators than others. I know some of our delegation really just being able to have the narratives of real life changes of folks who, for instance, may have been experiencing homelessness, but then had access to programs like guaranteed income, and allowed them the financial bandwidth to be able to make rent. And so some of those stories and some of that data on a large scale and small scale have been very impactful. Some it's cost savings, like talking about like the cost savings that you have with cash-based policies. Oftentimes for every dollar that you invest in like cash savings, wraparound services, you can save sometimes up to $7 in preventative care, such as, of course, you all are very familiar with child welfare services and how expensive that can be, including criminal justice interventions also can be very expensive. And so sharing some of the cost savings data can be very impactful with some legislators. Also, building relationships with legislators. And so there are times where United Way is definitely present, giving testimony, saying "Me too" at state legislation hearings as well as federal legislation hearings. Because we do make at least 2 trips to DC annually to speak on federal legislation. Then also community mobilization and empowerment. And so really getting voices from the grassroots. And so, like for instance, our guaranteed income program, we have a participant advisory group that we go to for counsel about how we want to shape policy. And so we want to hear from actual participants and voices about, what's important. And then when we have advocacy days and lobby days, like as many of you all are very familiar, we mobilize our participants to come. And then we also look for funding so that we can also compensate their time because they're giving us their time and their expertise. And so we try to make sure that we're compensating them for that, because it definitely takes time to drive out and to be able to provide us that resource. And then also with media and public awareness, we use tools such as op-eds, social media, and press engagement to amplify voices. And the Sacramento media market is definitely buzzing, and we have a media and comms team that our CEO has really invested in, along with our data initiatives too, is something that's very important to our CEO as well as our board and leadership. And so we've invested in lifting up those stories, and that has definitely resulted in more of our ability to raise awareness and also fund the programs that make an impact in individual lives. Okay. So some of the policy strategies, as we shared a little bit earlier, you all shared the coalitions that you all are a part of. Some of the things that we do is participate and activate in these coalitions. And this is all at the local, state, and federal level. We participate in coalitions, depending upon what the policy is on all of these different levels. And then also, in addition, we host individual meetings and briefings with legislators and policymakers to provide information and data. And we really work to cultivate these relationships over years and visits. And it's definitely taken an investment of time and dedicated staff for us to make an impact in this area. And we also invite our policymakers to service opportunities. And so, for instance, we have an annual event called United Way Reads. And this traditionally has taken place within our Yolo County service area. And so this event is where we get a local author, and we really strive to find a local author of color that speaks to the population that we're serving, and so they get books and authors that they may not normally have access to. And then we invite our local city, Woodland City Council, because the event actually took place in Woodland. We're all invited. Many came to participate. Many came to read with our students. We also invited the school board, as well as the local Joint Unified School District to come and participate, see the things that we do, and also the hope is to continue and to invest in programs like this that support literacy within the community. And so all of these are just different types of policy strategies that we use to engage our elected officials and let them know the work that we're doing. And so here is another policy tool that we use is an asset map. And so one of the first things when I started at United Way was really wrapping my mind around all the programs that we provide and the services, the grant funding, the elected officials who are champions of these programs. And so we really had to map out our services and the funding and how we were going to sustain these programs, as well as some of the actual policy issues that are underlying these systems that we're trying to impact, and seeing how we can work with partners for these systems. Like, for instance, our free tax prep program. One of the things that we are advocating for is expanding the Young Child Tax Credit and the California Earned Income Tax Credit. As we've seen, of course, on the federal level, when we expanded the Child Tax Credit, it cut child poverty in half. And so some of the things that we're, because of that system, because we are a part of helping individual families file their returns all throughout our 5-county region, we see the impacts when we bring dollars back into people's households, which also increases, of course, economic stimulation throughout our 5-county region, because people have more money to be able to spend and invest in the economy. And so seeing that and being a subject matter expert, we're forwarding and supporting policy that will expand these tax credits and making sure that they're and fighting for them to be more permanent. And End Poverty California, I know we shared earlier that coalition is doing a lot of that work too. on the state level. And so when like In Poverty California has their annual lobby days, we participate. We invite our participants in our guaranteed income program to come to those. But here, it helps us to organize like who we wanted to speak to around these tax credit initiatives on the state level, on the county level, as well as on the federal level. And so, for instance, under Free Tax Prep, Congressman Thompson, who represents our Woodland, Solano, Yolo County area, he's one of our congressional representatives. We have visited him both in DC as well as locally in the district. He's come out to our offices, just building that relationship and knowing that the committees he sits on, he's on like the Ways and Means Committee, which is the oldest federal tax committee, tax body that looks at tax legislation. And so we've actually asked him about a lot of tax issues, including expanding the child tax credit and a lot of other exemption issues around guaranteed income and how in the treatment for taxation purposes. And so there are a lot of issues that we coordinate, and we use this asset map to organize our efforts, and really use it as a tool also for sustainability for funding. And so I'll pause for a second and see if there are any questions about how we put this together, or any policy tools, or also too, if anyone has any particular tools around like organizing relationships that they want to share. And you can feel free to come off mute. And one thing too, I will also share is we are looking at also tracking our contacts. And so this is something that we could share with our board of directors, as well as just being able to internally track our progress of who we are reaching out to, what resulted in the meetings and the relationships that we have for them, or what are some things that we can ask for them in the future. And so we're also, some of the evolution of our asset map is using it as a tracking mechanism to track our progress with influencing policy. And so also feel free to, if you have anything to share it in the chat as well too, in terms of tools that you all used. And then we can go to the next slide.
Okay. And there'll be time at the end for questions as well. This red is a little bit aggressive. So next we want to talk about kind of the data aspect of this, and talk through a couple of the steps that we think about, not just with advocacy, but just kind of with storytelling in general about our programs. But advocacy is obviously an important avenue for it. And so we see kind of one of the first steps, Ejiro already mentioned this a little bit, is to understand your audience. Obviously, along with that, you have to, maybe the very first step 0 might be, understanding what your goal is with advocacy, and what message you're trying to get across, or what specific, legislation you're trying to get passed or start or stop. What change you want to see, and who are the people that influence that change. And so once you know those, then you have an audience, and understanding your audience is really important. And the first question I think about is, the type of data that is convincing to your audience. We have, are they someone that might be convinced more by quantitative data, or potentially qualitative data stuff? Quantitative data is much more numeric and can be statistical, but there's also a wide range of quantitative data. Some people potentially with STEM backgrounds, or with higher kind of proclivity to numeracy, might be interested in things, want to see like a randomized control trial on the impacts of a specific type of intervention, and which is not always possible, but there are, those in some areas, and so some people are convinced by that type of data. But there's also, much less rigorous numerical and quantitative data as well. Simple summary statistics, or, comparing a before and after of a particular program, of a particular intervention. Values is useful and impactful. Qualitative data, on the other hand, is can be stories, it can be pictures, it can be videos, it is less structured, and speaks more to specific impacts, speaks more to experience, speaks more to emotion, speaks more to feeling as well, which is valid and valuable. I personally feel that qualitative data, in many places is kind of undervalued, I think. Um, and yeah, we could go, have a long conversation about why that is, but yeah, so it's important to think about who is your audience, what types of information, what types of data might be convincing to them. Maybe it's quantitative, maybe it's qualitative, maybe it's a combination. Maybe there's a specific angle as well. For example, we're advocates of guaranteed income, and we think it's a powerful tool. We're still learning more about it. We're conducting our own research on it. But say we wanted to advocate with a particular congressman, relative to specific bill that might be passing around guaranteed income, and we knew, for example, that they're heavily interested in health and healthcare and health outcomes of individuals and of their constituents. Then, for example, we might, tailor our data collection and how we're organizing, and what kind of data we bring to them around the link between guaranteed income and health outcomes. I'll talk more about that on the next slide a little bit. I'm curious, within our group here, so yeah, we've got 24 people. I had a second question as well in a poll about what type of data is convincing to you. I'm curious if anyone would be willing to share, either personally, what type of information is convincing for you for making decisions or influencing the way you think about something. It's a highly fluid thing, and I think the first good step to like practice thinking about tailoring your data is to do it with yourself. Like what what convinces you? And so maybe we'll start there. Yeah. Does anyone want to share personally what type of information is impact, or combination of information, combination of data types is convincing to you in yeah, changing your mind around a specific issue, or feeling more strongly about a specific issue or specific topic, or yeah. Is anyone willing to share? Please just feel free to come off mute and share your personal perspective on what's impactful to you.
I
Oh, thank you for sharing, Sol. I think we're having a little bit of issues hearing um, your response. Maybe get a little bit closer to your mic, and then come off mute again. But I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Can you hear me now?
A little better. It's still cutting in and out. Can others hear her? Ejiro, can you hear her? Yeah, I think we can't. Yeah, it's still cutting in and out quite a lot. And it's like there's, yeah, background noise at one point. So maybe if you want to share yours in chat, I don't know if anyone else would be willing to um, share. I am interested to hear, Sol, your experience, but maybe if you could type it in chat, we'd be able to uh, hear your experience better. Anyone else willing to share? Okay, we'll move on. It's completely fine. Okay, so once you kind of understand your audience and maybe have some perspective on the type of data, quantitative or qualitative, a specific angle, or maybe some combination of quantitative or qualitative data, obviously, you need to gather that data, gather that evidence. I think, there's one way to think about the categories of evidence or something that we call secondary data versus primary data. And secondary data is data that's already existing, that someone else has collected and researched and analyzed. This could be, scholarly publications. You could find, using things like Google Scholar. You can ask ChatGPT questions and ask them to ask it to cite specific research studies, and you can follow those links. And it's a good way to like integrate a little bit of like having a very specific question and seeing if there's any research on that. We can also use, high quality reports or websites. Obviously, if you're using secondary data, it's important to think about who your audience is and the geography of that data and the geography of your audience, and whether or not they represent, particularly if they're elected officials and if they have a constituency, thinking about, trying to get secondary data from their constituency would obviously be more impactful, but is not always possible. And so yeah, secondary data, the advantages of secondary data obviously is, there's been a ton of work and there's a ton of data already out there showing all different kinds of things. And yeah, it just takes a little bit of searching on our part to find that and then to frame it in a way that relates the results to what we're specifically advocating for in our specific case and with our specific audience. And so it's just, maybe a little bit more work framing, but all the work of collecting and analyzing and validating the data is done for you, which is great, and I think should be used a lot more. I think both of these should be used a lot more, but using secondary data is something that is quite simple, just because it requires just searching to find it. And then for primary data, the advantages of using primary data is when you are conducting data collection yourself. And so obviously not all organizations have the capacity to do this. We are a nonprofit that's implementing programs and is collecting data and reporting on those programs. So we are kind of always collecting primary data, but we're collecting different types depending on the program and depending on our donors. One advantage of collecting primary data is you're able to get very specific data and provide answers to very specific questions, including, with geographic specificity. But also, if you think about my example that I gave with guaranteed income and trying to advocate with someone who's interested in health outcomes, we could design in our baseline survey and inline survey with guaranteed income programs to include questions about health outcomes, very specific to either the specific constituency or the specific aspects of advocacy that we think would be most impactful with our audience. So you can get very specific and you can get exactly the type of numbers you want, but it obviously requires quite a bit of resources and capacities and systems to be able to do that. So there is a trade-off there. And then lastly, I won't spend much time on this. There's just different ways that you can present and share your data to your audience with things like policy briefs, white papers, in-person communications, whether call or in-meeting person or presentation, emails. And this is, again, more thinking about when we're thinking about our audience being an individual and we're trying to advocate with an individual or a group of individuals, these make sense. But Ejiro, mentioned above, sometimes our advocacy, depending on our audience, takes the form of local media or our channel takes the form of a local media or social media when we have a broader audience for what we're trying to advocate for. I think there's a raised hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hey. Thank you. I was just this is reminding me on our local child care planning council, some of our projects have been planning and holding a public forum in our county. And so what we've done is we've invited a lot of local business owners and large company employers in our area, prisons, hospitals, and talked about the impacts on them when there is no childcare available or when we're lacking that, and how that impacts people showing up for work, and then how that trickles down, right? And so we've also got permissions from Humboldt County, who created this really great video on a day in the life of no childcare. And so we present that, and people are able to see, get a better idea of what that really looks like, because even if you don't have children, it impacts all of us in some way. And so that was just something that I wanted to share, that the video was really impactful, and sharing those personal stories from people in our local community was really great. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's an excellent example, very clear audience. I love these steps. I love thinking about data in general, but I love that your example included like a deep understanding of your audience, and really this work, and a lot of good work with data like requires a lot of empathy of putting yourselves in the shoes of the people you're trying to advocate with, and trying to understand what's important to them, and then communicating about that, and providing data or perspectives around that. And so creating this video and advocating with local business owners around how an issue that your organization is advocating around impacts them is really, really great example. So thank you for sharing. And I love the creativity with it, and I love the empathy of it. I think it's great. Okay, I want to keep moving forward. Here's an example from our organization of a policy brief that's a bit more on the quantitative side. I'm going to hand it over to Ejiro to explain a little bit about the kind of the purpose of this brief.
Sure, I'll just give some quick context. I know Chris is going to share some of the key takeaways from the policy brief, but we constructed this policy brief when we were doing a federal trip to DC. We were invited to the White House, our CEO was, and along with other CEOs of United Ways. And so some of the content you'll see is specific to highlighting the Sacramento region, and there was a meeting of CEOs with one of the special advisors to the president at the time. And we constructed this to be very audience specific and highlight key metrics from guaranteed income and some of our other key programs as well too.
Yeah, and some things that stand out to me around this is, visually, obviously the first thing that jumps out is there's the graph on the bottom left that shows kind of before guaranteed income payments and after guaranteed income payments, our participants' ability to meet an unexpected $400 expense, and seeing this jump and the visual of the small red pizza slice to a much larger, 3 times larger pizza slice of ability of participants to meet unexpected expenses is impactful. It shows a before and after. Obviously, this isn't a randomized controlled trial. We do have controlled trials with some of our guaranteed income cohorts. But yeah, we felt that this was an impactful metric and deserved and impactful such that we dedicated space on this page, a good amount of space on this page, just to show this one metric and then one change in this metric. And so that's just some of our thought processes around this. Obviously, in general, this brief is much more quantitative. You don't see individual stories. You see the picture is a qualitative element of, but you don't see stories of families. And we felt like this would be the most impactful for this audience. One of the things, well, I think I'll mention it maybe after our next example. So this is kind of a bit more of a quantitative example. Another example that we wanted to share was this short video that our team put together. We got just about
I didn't know where to
here.
turn. I didn't know where to seek help. And it wasn't until maybe after the first 30 days that I was brought to United Way. Imagine you've been in your home for 10 years. Imagine that being taken away from you. And you...
Oh, sorry. Just trying to...
I didn't know where to turn. That I was brought to United Way. Imagine you've been in your home for 10 years. Imagine that being taken away from you. And you not knowing what to do, not knowing where to go. How would it make you feel? 9 times out of 10, you'd be devastated. Every time I would look at my son, I would cry. And I love my baby, you know. He's just a sweet face. But every time I would look at him, all I could think about was, I'm losing our home. It put a lot of strain on my relationship with my fiance. The both of us, we would beat ourselves up. You know, we played the blame game. This was all my fault. This was all his fault, and it made us feel like really bad parents. My friend reached out and was like, "Hey, have you heard of United Way?" And then she told me what you guys did, and I called instantly. But they were willing to actually cover the whole $57.90 for me, and I paid the first month's rent to move in, and now we have a home. So literally the first day I made the house a home, and I saw him, and he was spinning in circles in the living room, and he was looking around at everything, and he was familiarizing. He was like, "That's my couch. That's my TV. That's my chair." I could see it in his eyes that he knew he was home. I wish there were more people in the world like the people at United Way. The world might just be a little bit better.
So yeah, our purpose in sharing this is not to toot our own horn, but simply to show an example of, kind of qualitative data, qualitative experience of an individual who participated in one of our programs, and back to like resources a little bit. Maybe the last thing I want to mention is obviously creating a video like this requires, again, human capacities and resources to dedicate to that. Our organization has strategically over the last few years invested in, our work around policy, our media team. As Ejiro mentioned, we hired a full-time videographer. I think just came on maybe 6 or 8 months ago. My position is a new position. My data kind of programmatic data position is a new position. And so, this work obviously requires investments, but there is a lot you can do, without making such big investments, but just to paint the picture of, how we're thinking about the different options and how we're investing in ourselves to be able to tell better stories and to try to influence the outcomes we want to see in our community. All right, I'll hand it back over to Ejiro for closing.
All right, thank you all for participating in our session. As Chris was mentioning earlier, a lot of what we do is sharing stories and looking at a particular audience and seeing where this resonates. This particular client, Rosie, we were able to support her through California Advancing and Innovating Medi-Cal through her local health plan. And so we were able to support with that deposit help through CalAIM. And so lifting up the stories of programs like that is what we do, particularly in this season where Medicaid is under attack. And so really appreciate our partnerships. I know that we even have one of our Solana partners on the call too. And just quickly, I wanted to just share another one of our fact sheets, and I'll put a link to that in the chat so you all can take a look at that to see how in other formats we share our impact. But I know we are getting short on time, but if there are any questions, anyone wanted to ask? We'll be here. Myself and Chris will we can put our emails in the chat if you wanted to reach out to us personally. Definitely have appreciated everyone's time and being able to hear from you all and you all hearing what our experience is in policy.